If you had one thing that you think that everyone in food service should know, the one thing you wish people would take away from this, what would that be?
Wow, that's a good, juicy question. So I think it would be...
Hello and welcome to the Bar Business Podcast, where we help bar owners increase profits, attract loyal guests, and simplify operations so you can avoid burnout and finally enjoy your life outside of your bar. I'm your host, Chris Schneider, the Bar Business Coach. Today on the Bar Business Podcast, we're joined by a fantastic guest, someone who actually does not come from the bar industry, more of a hotel person. But you know what? Here's the thing. Hotels contain a lot of bars and restaurants. Joining us today is Geoffrey Toffetti. He has been in the business for about over 25 years. I think closer to 30 or 40. I don't know. He'll tell me because I'm probably wrong. But he works with over 3,000 hotels with his company, Frontline Performance Group. And those 3,000 hotels have over 8,000 bars and restaurants. So while a lot of times hotels and bars were a little bit different, this guy is in hotels but sees the bars and restaurants all day long. And one thing that's really cool that we'll get into here as we talk is that with hotels, they have something that a lot of independent bars don't normally have, which is data. And he's been able to correlate that data, use that data, and come up with some really good insights and different ways of looking at everything from training to sales mixes and how they impact bar and restaurant bottom lines. So Geoffrey, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so happy to be here, Chris. I've been looking forward to this.
I hopefully did your company some credit, but go ahead, fill everybody in on your background and fill in anything that I just missed or got wrong there.
Sure, there's a few things in there. Yes, so I started my career in hospitality, so I would say about 35 years ago I was in hospitality. And then had a 11-year gap, and then when I started with Frontline Performance Group, we didn't work with any hotels. That was in 2011, but I knew hotels, so I was like, what we do is going to apply. So what Frontline Performance Group does and has always done is help companies optimize the guest and customer experience at the front line through a variety of things, training being one of them and analytics being another. And we have a software platform we call Engage that ingests all that data coming out of either the point of sale or the property management system. And it allows us to get really specific about what KPIs and metrics drive the result that we're seeking, and then apply a lot of intelligence to the training that we provide to try and get the individuals, this would be front desk agents or servers or bartenders, to perform better. And they get rewarded by earning more money and being better at their jobs. And the business obviously wins because they make more money and the guests are happier. So it's a very virtuous cycle for us that the more that our customers embrace what we do, the better they do, the more people make, the less turnover they have, more guest loyalty, everyone wins. So it's a pretty fun place to exist.
With all that, because you are taking massive amounts of data, you're sifting through it. You guys have been working on, different sales techniques that we'll get into as we talk through, but have really optimized kind of hotel front desks and bars and restaurants, the servers and the bartenders in those hotels as well. But in your experience, right, looking at all this data of all these clients that you have, what's kind of the big gap that people are missing where you see independents are not hitting the mark where the hotels are?
Well, I would love to say that they're hitting it and they're not. I think everyone's missing the mark in some ways. The main one probably it's going to sound so simple, but the main one is basically revealing to individuals how they're performing against their peer group. That's something that, like in a sales position, is very obvious because who sold what is known to the whole company. But in a frontline environment, often it's buried in the data and it's very difficult to ascertain who your top performers are and what are they top performers in. You can have someone that's really, really good at, selling top shelf liquor and others that are really good at turning the rounds faster, and so you have strengths and weaknesses throughout, but that's the big gap, is systematically interrogating the data to understand who's performing and who's not, and then what to do about it. Because it's one thing to know that someone's not performing. It's another then to say, well, what do I do about it? So those kind of go hand in hand. And there's also a missing metric in food and beverage that we are going to try and solve this because we need the metric is how do you compare outlets to outlets in different environments? So if you own 3 bars, let's say, and one's in the city center and one's out by the mall, how do you benchmark them against each other? So we're working on a solution for that because in theme parks, in car rental, and in front desk, we have metrics that do that. So we're pretty excited that we can bring something to food and beverage that will help managers and restaurateurs and bar owners be able to benchmark their own portfolios and know who's really performing and who's not.
And when we talk about performance and we're kind of looking at, what revenue people are generating, when you're digging through the data across your clients, what kind of gap do you see between the top performers and the bottom performers? I mean, I feel like a lot of people probably intuitively are listening to this and they're going, oh, well, there's not that big of a difference. But I have a feeling your data shows something different.
The data definitely shows something different. In the worst case scenario, we're seeing a multiple effect, where you have a few performers that are like double. That's not as common. I'd say what's really common that we're seeing a lot is like 35% between top and bottom. And that's if you normalize for volume. So if you take out the people who only had 5 tables because they're a supervisor and they filled in or something. If you get to the regular professionals, it's like 35% from top to bottom, which is a massive, massive change, particularly because in the food and beverage industry in general, and I don't mean to insult anyone who's listening to your podcast, but it tends to be a pretty low margin business. At the bottom, the bottom line margin tends to be even single digits in a lot of cases. So if you have a 30% differential between two different people, let's put it in real numbers. Let's say the average revenue per guest of the top performer is $100, and of the bottom performer, it's $60 or $65. That means that every time you give them access to one of your guests, they're costing you $35. That's how business owners need to be thinking about it. But the challenge, back to the prior question, the challenge has been, how do you know that? How do you know it without spending your whole weekend crunching through data and reports? That's what we're trying to provide the marketplace is on-demand, easy to interpret conclusions about what's going on in your operation, so then you can address it.
Yeah, and I think it's really great the way you frame that because if we were talking $35 a guest, and say you have, say you're a small bar, you got 10 servers, right? And half of them are at the low end, half of them are at the high end. That's a lot of money, right? And that's going to add up quick. And it goes towards something that I know people listening have heard me rail about, which is understand people's capacity, right? Because that's the other piece here. I assume that when you're looking at those gaps, some of it is training, some of it is just skill, innate skill to an extent, because salesmanship, some people kind of have it better than others. Some of it's got to be effort, but I imagine the biggest chunk still goes back to that training piece, where you can start to normalize that, even though you have some folks that are going to be a little bit naturally better salespeople than others.
Yeah. So one of the kind of paradoxes of being in the performance business is that while you're correct, training's a big part of it. I would combine it with training and awareness. A lot of people don't know that they're in the middle of the pack. They don't know they're leaving money on the table. So just knowing that gets them engaged. But there's always a top performer or top performers, and there's always bottom performers. So even as the lower end of the leaderboard begins to advance, the top is also advancing. So it's not like the person who's at 100 and the person who's at 65, the 65 is going to get to 80 and the 100 is going to stay put. They're going to get to 110 or 115. So the tide rises all boats, right? So the top performers are going to improve as you start rolling out systems and training as well as everyone else. But I think we're finding that the biggest culprit is that the servers or bartenders, they don't know. They don't know that they're underperforming to their peers. They don't realize they could get a 20% raise from the same guests, the same shift. They don't have to work anymore. And once they realize that, then they get really engaged in the training. And that's when you see the development occur very quickly.
Yeah, and that makes a lot of sense, right? Because it especially when we're dealing with bars and restaurants and you're upselling, right? That's what this all comes down to. I feel like in a lot of cases, I want a vodka martini. Oh, well, why don't you get Grey Goose, right? Or, oh, we're done with dinner. Why don't you have some dessert?
Yeah, there's techniques. There's a lot of psychology in selling, as anyone who sells knows. But when you're trying to teach it to people, you have to kind of boil it down to some creeds and some repetitive concepts. But one of them is what you were just doing there is when someone orders a vodka martini, you don't ask them the choice. You say Grey Goose, and this is something that humans mirror. So and when you're doing this, your brain is thinking, yes, it's amazing how the power of that. But there's a lot of that stuff that no one's ever been taught because it's a specialty. So when you combine awareness and good leadership and good training and techniques like that, you can start to see how it can be transformational for people. They just don't realize how to be influential because they learn from shadowing someone. They never went to sales school, so we love bringing this stuff out because little techniques like that make a huge difference.
Absolutely. And I know one of the things, and we'll get into some techniques and some of those things a little bit more, but before we get onto there, I want to stop for a second and talk about, because I know in your data, in addition to finding ways to make people better, you've also found a bunch of places where there are just commonly revenue leaks. And to me, the revenue leaks are almost the easier part than the sales, right? Because the sales, now I got to train someone, I have to get my staff involved, I have to get buy-in. Revenue leaks, a lot of times from the management end, you can kind of solve those pretty quickly. And one of the ones you had mentioned to me when we were talking the other day was discount percentages and looking at discounts and servers. So, what have you found there? And break it down for a little bit about why that might be going on.
Yeah, so this was a fascinating development for us. So we, like many, are bringing AI into our application, and the way we're doing it is we're having the AI interrogate the data and then bring out what we're calling insights, things that are important in the data that you might miss. And we're guiding some of that. And we're also asking it open-ended questions. And one of the questions that we asked was, give us some examples of interesting trends in the data. And this was in a large data set coming out of a point of sale system. And one of the things it came back with was discounting, that there was a massive difference between servers, the discount rates and frequencies. So it found three people in this particular example. It found three people that were discounting more than a third of their checks, and it was affecting 5% of their total revenue. Now, if you're a single digit business and you have people leaking 5% of your revenue for no good reason, to your point, you can nip that immediately. And it allows the manager to say, okay, what is a normal amount of discounting? Well, if you take everyone else and look at it, you're at like 5 to 7%. Okay, that sounds reasonable. People had a problem, their meal wasn't right, whatever. But a third, it's either they are incompetent and they're doing something systemically wrong, or they're doing it to try and gain favor for tips or something. But something has gone wrong there. And that's one of those things that we are so excited about. What else can we find that could be fed to the manager in a very simple language to say, you probably need to talk to George because he's discounting a third of his checks. And then the manager doesn't have to go and try and find it. It's right there at their fingertips.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that as AI develops, right? Because the one thing AI is really good at is pattern recognition, and starting to let it go into data and find these patterns that we might look for, but I'm sure if you were trying to do that same discount analysis by hand, it would have taken 10-15 hours, and you just wouldn't have done it. Versus just sending it in there and saying, okay, where's the interesting pattern, and then finding that, because that's absolutely huge. And to your point, if you're talking about a business that's making 7-8%, and then you lose 5% of that, well, if you own the business and that's all you're doing, you're not going on vacation. You're right. You're not eating well. You might not have the car you want. Like, that's a huge lifestyle impact for the owner.
100%. And it would be very difficult. To your point, I'm a data jockey. I like Excel. It would take hours and hours to find that fact. And once you found it, to be able to replicate finding it every week, every month. I mean, you'd have to be a data analyst. It's very onerous, and we're very sympathetic to that. That's why we're so excited, because if a manager could open their phone and know what the discount rate was last night and who discounted what in 2 seconds, they can see who's doing it. They can focus on the real problem, which is what is going wrong with the meal. Is it the kitchen? Is it the what is it that's causing this? Um, but you can stop that leakage, and we're starting to investigate how we can use this same technology to go a step further from discounting, maybe toward something a little more nefarious that goes on in restaurants. But we think we're going to be able to find a lot of those things. Like the same drink being rung up and discounted on multiple checks. That's a very common, scheme. But the data, it could find that stuff like immediately. You wouldn't even have to look. Like we envision an alert going off when someone is stealing, that the manager knows immediately where it is, almost produces the evidence for them.
Well, I think that's something that hopefully as AI develops, a lot of these just because you and I both know stealing in a bar or restaurant's not difficult, right? And none of us like to say it that way, but it's really kind of easy. And either you or I'm sure could work behind a bar and steal a couple $100 a night and get away with it because we know all the ways that people steal and we know how to stop them, so we know how to do it. But with AI and this ability, we might actually be able to see loss prevention in hospitality at a level that was never before possible.
Correct. And we think we could be on the edge of that because we're in the data now poking around, and trying to figure out how do you teach the AI what to look for? How do you train it to find fraud? And fraud is not our business, but if it's there and it's going to add value to the restaurant or bar owner, we're going to do it. And it could coincide with training because it maybe it's again maybe it's theft is one thing, but maybe it's just incompetence that's causing breakage, spillage, things that are just recurring, and it's lumping up around certain people. Then you can address it.
Yeah, I mean, it's well, I tell this to folks that I do consulting for from time to time. I'm like, just don't assume malice when it could just be incompetence, right? Like there's always a chance that somebody's stealing from you. There's also a chance that somebody's just doesn't know that they're doing something wrong. Now getting away from the theft and all that for a second, let's get back to the fun sort of sales stuff. One of the things I know that you like to talk about is not upselling, but upgrades. And I think that's, there are a lot of times in the restaurant industry where we talk about use specific words, right? Like we don't have customers, we have guests. So why in this case upgrades, not upselling?
Because no one likes to be upsold. You don't like it's creepy, it's icky when people are trying to sell you things. And upgrading is more experiential. So you're improving the experience. So that's really why we draw the distinction. Is that while it is technically upselling, the way we view it is the mission is to enhance the guest's experience. And with that enhanced experience comes more revenue because you get what you pay for. So when we're teaching, it's about recommendation, not asking. You don't ask closed-ended questions. You don't say, "Do you want this?" That feels, You say, most people that have steak also, enjoy the crab side, or a person that has this enjoys this beverage. And again, you're affirming, and then people buy it because they think you're looking out for them, and you are looking out for them. So the difference there, the distinction is we're not selling, we're serving, and through service, you make a lot more money. The best salespeople in the world are the best at service. They service their customers better than anyone else. That's why they're the best salespeople. It's not because they have the slickest presentation or they have this innate crazy personality. It's that they are dialed in, locked in on their customer, their guest, and making sure they're having the best experience they can.
And, as you said that, it makes me think of one of the things I love about just kind of hospitality in general and about bars, about restaurants. Everyone's on the same team, right? If you're, because your servers are relying on tips, you're relying on your servers getting revenue. When everyone makes more money, it all happens together and there's not a loser, especially when you get into things like upgrades, right? There's no loser when I sell you more vodka. We all get to win together.
No, it's totally correct. 100% agree with what you just said because You can imagine situations where you're asking an employee to do more and it benefits the business and it doesn't benefit them. That's common in most businesses there's no innate reason for someone to try harder, which is a big part of what we do is we try to teach companies how to incentivize and motivate people through the right kinds of actions. But you're right, in food and beverage, it's innate. If you ask me to sell more margaritas and I sell more margaritas, I'm gonna make more money, and you're gonna make more money. And, like, this is something we love to say. This might be one of those things that maybe someone out there will take this away and implement it and make a bunch of money. If you want let's stick with margaritas. If you want your employees to sell more margaritas, raise the price by $2 and give it to them. You will sell more margaritas than any competitor, whether you're priced higher than them or not. Right? So it's that kind of thinking that drives performance and makes it a win-win-win-win for everyone. Because you're right, they're innately chasing the money and the incentives align.
So, is there any specific, as we're talking through s- upgrades or suggestive selling, and we're talking about having all this aligned, is there any specific thing that you see top performers do that average performers don't do?
Yes, two things primarily. We've noticed a pattern in service, and this is mostly in a meal environment, but it's true at the bar as well. Is you give someone a bunch of attention when they first get there, and then you disappear for 20 30 minutes and you leave the guest frustrated. And the top performers never do that. Their head is on a swivel. They're watching everyone around them to see, does anyone need them? And they're replenishing as soon as possible and proactive replenishment. So that was going to be the second thing is particularly in beverage, proactive replenishment is like a gold mine because we're seeing that top performers will replenish more times on average per cover than a low performer. It's like this, the low performer mentality tends to be, I'm here to help you, tell me what you want. That's what a low performer tends to think. And they might be very nice and they show up to work on time and they're reliable, but that's what they're thinking. I'm just here to take orders. The top performer is thinking, how can I make this the best experience for you with every guest? And that usually means you buying more things or buying more expensive things because you know it's going to work for them and being super attentive to them and making sure that that extra round gets served. That would be the biggest difference.
And I hadn't really thought about it. Honestly, this is something I haven't thought about in years. But one of the things I used to do when I had my bar was when the drink is a third of the way left, that's when you ask for the next round. Because the second they get to the bottom of that glass, they're now deciding whether or not they want to leave.
That's
So
right.
that proactive replenishment, and thanks for jogging my memory on that because I really have not thought about that in a decade. That was key
It's
to making
huge.
money.
I mean, if your average cover comes in and has 3 rounds, let's say, that's the average. If you sell another round, you just made 25% more revenue. I mean, that's the reality. And we actually advocate, especially if you're a busy bar. I mean, there's nothing more frustrating than belling up to the bar and it takes 10 minutes for someone to make eye contact with you. And you don't know if someone at the other end has cut in front of you and there's all of that. But once you actually get served, a technique that we advocate for is ask them if they want automatic replenishment. You could say, do you want me to replenish your drink when the food comes? Do you want me to replenish your drink when I see it down here? And then you don't even have to ask them again. You just hand them their next drink. And that is like magic to them because the other thing that happens when you get to the end of the glass, you're right. You're either thinking I'm going to leave or now you're looking for the bartender and you can't find them. And you're sitting there with that empty glass and it's frustrating. So that proactive replenishment is critical, no doubt. And it works whether it's table service or bar service. You keep people getting what they want on a timely and don't make them look for you.
Mhm. Well, and not making them look for you. That's one of the biggest things there is, right? And it seems so simple, but we all mess it up so often. It's kind of annoying. Um, Another thing I wanted to get in that you had mentioned the last time we talked was discretionary effort. Because I love the term, right? But tell us a little about what it is and why does it matter?
Absolutely. Discretionary effort is the difference between doing enough work to not be fired or doing as much as you can to drive the mission forward as an employee. Um, so you're never going to get fired if you don't give up your discretionary effort as long as you're doing good work and you're reliable. But the people who light the world on fire are the people who give everything they've got. And that extra is at the discretion of the individual. It cannot be coerced. You can't make them give it to you. You can make them give a minimum standard, but you can't make them give everything. So that comes down to leadership. And the reason we focus on discretionary effort is because the frontline leaders, the bar managers, the restaurant managers, the hotel managers, they make or break how much effort they get from their teams. And there's some fundamental truths, and we call them non-negotiables, that you have to have in place in order to get someone to actually start giving you that. There are people that will do it innately. They're the top of the leaderboard, whether you're a good manager or a bad manager. They're intrinsically motivated. But most people need an environment to be conducive to that level of effort, and they have to want to give it to their leader, and it's always their leader. It's not the enterprise or the company. It's who they're working for that can unlock that.
If you're an employer, right? Let's say you own a bar. Uh, how do you start to unlock that? How do you make folks actually care?
Yeah, the first thing, and some people won't like this because it makes them uncomfortable, but it's trust. Um, my personal motto is leaders give trust first. And the reason for that is, I'm Gen X, so we were raised still in that time frame where everything was about earning your respect and you have to earn my trust and all that. That's a fallacy, because when you tell someone you have to earn my trust, or you have to earn my respect, what you're actually saying to them is that you don't trust them. And there is no human that I've ever met that will give trust to someone who has just stated that they don't trust me. So you're starting off on this weird, kind of contentious, competitive landscape with your employees. The way that we handle it is, when we hire someone, we put them through a lot of interviews. It's very difficult to get on here, but when you're hired, we're very deliberate about it. We trust you. We respect you. Go do good work. And that creates an environment of trust. That's number one. If you don't have trust, you can't do anything else. And then the non-negotiables kind of build on that. Transparent communication. Tell your employees what's going on. Tell them if you have a problem. Tell them it's going to be a rough night. Let them in on it. Don't micromanage people. Once they're trained, you have to micromanage newbies, but once they're trained, let them make mistakes and then coach the mistake. Don't sit over their shoulder, try to prevent mistakes, because then you're just going to ruin your relationship. So there's a lot of that general leadership stuff. But once you lay that foundation, you can get people excited to come to work. The other thing that I would say, that for the people listening, it's really important, is the burden of leadership. Sometimes it can be a little heavy. It can be a little dark. You have people probably in your sphere of influence where you and their job is the bright spot in their world. It's the only sanctuary they have, because their personal life is so tough or troubled or whatever. And once a leader accepts that burden, then, and you have that perspective, you can start to bring people into a more intimate relationship with you, and then you can trust each other, and then you can motivate them, and then you can ask them to give you more effort, to try harder, and they will, because leaders go first. So they see you working hard, and they also see that you care about them, and you treat them the way that you treat your customers or your guests, and it's a love fest. Then you can start to ask for that. And then if they don't give it to you, and they break your trust, get rid of them, because you've given them everything you can give them, and then it's on them.
So we're running a little short on time. And this is just
I know this
great.
went fast.
This has been a super fast, good conversation. But tell us a little bit about Frontline Performance Group, what you guys got going on, and how people can learn more if they want to get in touch and figure out more about what you guys do.
Yeah, absolutely. So Frontline Performance Group's website is www.frontlinepg, like performancegroup.com. We try to keep it very fresh, so everything we're doing is on there. We put resources up there, but there's also a way to reach us. So if you want more, like you want to have a conversation, there's a way to reach us there. I also am very active on LinkedIn. You can find me, G. Toffetti. I actually got on early, so I have my initials and my last name. There's no numbers and stuff in there. So you can find me on LinkedIn. I love to connect to people in the industry, have conversations with them. those would probably be, and Frontline is also on LinkedIn. Those would probably be the most effective ways to reach us if you want to learn more.
Well, we will link all that in the show notes. So if you're listening and you think, hey, Geoffrey's a great guy, I want to learn some more, we'll have those links there for you to go check it out. Before I let you go, one final question, because I know a lot of what you guys do is hotels. It's big business. A lot of the people listening to this are small business, so not quite the same group. But if you had one thing that you think that everyone in food service should know, the one thing you wish people would take away from this, what would that be?
Wow, that's a good juicy question. Let me see. I got to give you a good one. Um, so I think it would be the idea that your guest will have the exact experience that your employees have from you. So, whatever vibe you want the guests to experience when they come into your establishment is the vibe that needs to be happening before you open the door, in the closed meetings. Even when people are being reprimanded, the vibe should be whatever it is you're trying to communicate in your brand, because it's often not the case. It's often do what I say, not what I do. You learn that from your parents, right? But it's very true with culture and service and employees. And when you do that, your employees will start to nurture your guests as if they own the business. So that would be my main takeaway: is treat your people the way you want them to treat your guests.
I think that is a fantastic note to wrap up on for today. Geoffrey, thank you so much again for being here and sharing all these insights that you have, especially since you get to look at so much more data than the rest of us and have been able to draw correlations that we may not all have the ability to see. Yeah, but just thank you so much for being here.
It was my absolute pleasure. I loved it. Thank you so much.
That about wraps it up for today. If you enjoyed today's insights, make sure you like, subscribe, and leave a review. If you are ready to take your bar to the next level, schedule a strategy session with me by clicking the link in the show notes below. Until next time, have a great day, and we will talk again later.